Hello and welcome to this recording where we're going to give some great news for people who are asthmatics or have family or friends who are asthmatics. The headline here is, why has your doctor not already told you this good news? Essentially there exists a breathing training that reduces asthma symptoms consistently, which was tested in major Australian hospitals and a few others around the world. This breathing training reduces need for relief medication by an average of 90%. We'll come over some stats with that a little bit later, but that's a fairly significant kind of a reduction in relief medication. As well as that, there's a reduction in need for steroid medication, in one study showing a 49% reduction. It's considered safe by the medical establishment, which is always really important. As well as reducing the medication and the symptoms, the quality of life scores and all these clinical trials are improved, and it's good to know that it works brilliantly in children and in adults. Sometimes in children it can work within days, and adults a week or two. Who says? In a minute we'll just hunt across to Wikipedia and have a bit of a quick look at that. Newspapers throughout the world, throughout the UK, the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, Australian Doctor, Sunday Telegraph, the Bulletin in Australia, the Herald in the UK, the Courier Mail in Australia, the TV Times New York, the Australian Financial Review. Recently the New York Times did a little article which made a bit of a kerfuffle in the press, which was great. BBC TV, Medical Observer, and hundreds more. Okay, we've clicked back across and I've just inserted the Wikipedia address up here for a search for Buteyko method. Simply because it's important that if you've not heard of this before, you need a few reference points. Now, this has been around since the 1960s. It was found by Professor Dr. Konstantin Buteyko, which is all good. Go and have a look at in your own time. Wikipedia, Buteyko method. The main thing was to know that it exists and that there are relatively coherent sources referring to it. It talks about nasal breathing. One of the things you learn very early in a Buteyko training is how to breathe through your nose, which if you've had challenges with that, with blocked nose, then this is the place to look before you take any further sprays or things up your nose. Clinical studies is mainly what I wanted to get to here. Between 1962 and 1982 there were 35 studies in Russia, and more recently they've been happening in Canada and a variety of other places. One of the main things here, common thread among the trials, is there a large reduction in reliever medication use, between 80 to 90%, and we'll cover that just briefly in a few moments. There's some theory there if you're interested in that, but the main thing is that if you've got asthma, this is something which is relatively mainstream, not particularly alternative. You learn the breathing and your asthma symptoms reduce by, as we say, somewhere in there 80 to 90% need for medication, which I think is pretty spectacular and extremely good news. Okay, now we come back to the main show. As we saw before, Wikipedia is rather good. All these newspapers essentially gave stories of people who had done the course and had similar responses as to those in the clinical trials. The medical profession at this point hasn't picked it up too much. Let's just have a look at one of the trials which happened in an Australian medical journal called the Medical Journal of Australia, which is emja.com.au. Let's just pause this for a second and we'll have a look at that trial. Okay, again, if you need to look up yourself, it's mja.com.au, and just do a search for Buteyko, or the main author of this, which was Professor Simon Bowler from the Mater Hospital in Brisbane. Now once you get to this point, it fills up with some fairly heavy-duty technical language. The main thing is this trial was designed to have a blind group. The blind group were taught standard asthma medication and some relaxation techniques. The other group, which is called BBT in this instance, is for Buteyko breathing technique. So two groups divided into relatively similar levels of asthma. Let's just go down, read through all this later. The essential points here is, here's the two groups before Buteyko and control. Control is the other group that was taught asthma training or standard asthma education and some relaxation. Buteyko was taught the groups. We can see in here that the mean adjusted beta agonist dose range was 943 micrograms per day. Now that's equivalent to 9.5 puffs of Ventolin. The control group, which is statistically similar, was 843 micrograms per day. The Buteyko group was doing 1,500 micrograms of inhaled steroid, and the other group 1,000 milligrams. So they were divided into these two groups, so that they're relatively similar groups, so that you can compare the data. The results we'll go through. Essentially, here's a graph, and I'll show you a slightly better one shortly. Let's go down to medication use. Medication use, so this white part here is the Buteyko group, or BBT. It was about 1,000, which is about 10 puffs of Ventolin per day, and after the 3-month period it was less than half a puff a day. The other group, there was a slight improvement, but not much one overall. In inhaled steroids, this is the Buteyko group. It went from 1,500, reduced by about half, by 49% here, and the other group essentially stayed the same, but statistically slightly improved. Quality of life, here's the Buteyko group, here's the after at month 3, much greater improvement and not much change in the other one. Slight improvement, which shows that education can help. And they discuss a variety of things. The main reason this wasn't absorbed into the main scientific community is because there was disagreement about how these spectacular results were produced rather than if they were produced. Let's go back to a summary of that. The Medical Journal of Australia, asthmatics were put into 2 equal groups. One group was taught relaxation asthma education, the other taught Buteyko breathing technique. At 3 months, the Buteyko group had reduced their daily relief medications by an average of 943 micrograms to 39 micrograms, which is a reduction of 95.8%. I'm not sure that's right, it might be 96.8%. Steroids also reduced by 49%. Let's look at a graph of that. So here we are before the training in terms of Ventolin type relief medications. And here we are after the training and sustained. Later studies showed the continued improvement. So 95.8%, steroids before, steroids after, 49%. Okay, so what? Just to jump in here, if you have asthma or emphysema or sleep apnea, go to that website. There's an offer where you can get a product for $2, which will get you started in any case. Also, if you've got family or friends who have asthma, emphysema or apnea, send them the link to this video, please. Remember, it reduces asthma relief drugs by 95.8 and improves quality of life. Even just that, without any of the other benefits, would be great. Please post this video to your Twitter or on Facebook, and like this video. And if you enjoy a bit of fun and you're ready for changing the world, send this link to your doctor. Okay, now at this point I'm going to run you through some case studies of people who've been in workshops. Doing a workshop is different to just purchasing a how-to manual, and it's the best way to do it if you can find someone in your part of the world who can do it. Edna, age 74, 100% decrease in Ventolin nebulizer, Ventolin puffer, mostly decreased, and she was also able to reduce her Atrovent. That was over a couple of weeks. Mac from Palarenda got to stop using his Atrovent nebulizer. He stopped his Ventolin puffer, and he also decreased his oxygen machine use, and his doctor was fairly happy with that whole process overall. Josephine from Mackay, I experienced bad sinus problems at any change of weather and during the cane flowering season, which is big here in North Queensland. That's before. During the course, I experienced an ability to be able to breathe a lot easier through both nostrils. My post-nasal drip and sinus cleared considerably. Bronwyn from Ingham, similarly she's in a cane growing area. The mucus across my throat, panic feeling that she had for 5 minutes on every morning, totally stopped. Quite often panic attacks are tied into breathing patterns, and the same course that helped her with her panic attacks helped others with other problems. And as she says, knowing how to do that if she has such troubles sort of helps. And plus she's got a 3-year-old son who's asthmatic, so that was a pretty good win. Annette, age 20, medication before, she was doing 12 puffs a day of Ventolin, plus some Becotide and Becanase. And she had a cold for, it seemed like, for years for her. After the course, her Becotide was all she was on, because that's something you reduce slowly after you're seeing your doctor, and she was able to not use her Ventolin because she'd had no attacks. Prior to the workshop, so this is a reference, that's 12 puffs and bad sleep. Gabrielle from Pimlico here in Townsville had some bronchiectasis, which is quite nasty, and had a variety of treatments for it. So she was feeling a bit awful. Within a short time, she slept through the night, improved sleep, energy level, more confident, which is pretty good when you've lost a fair chunk of lung and you've got bronchiectasis. Karen from Mackay, I love this particular statement. I mean, she did really well to reduce her need for the Ventolin puffer because she had no symptoms. Before the workshop, I relied on Ventolin morning and night. Now I hardly ever used it at all. For the first time, I went out with my girlfriends and didn't use my Ventolin before leaving, or using antihistamine to counteract the smoke of the nightclubs. I think that's a pretty important thing when you're 30 and you're having some fun. Tony came in from out west. She was on a massive doses of Ventolin, not terribly well controlled, and within a short time she'd stopped using the nebulizer and her puffer. And she'd been doing that approximately 12 years, so it was a spectacular case. Alice, who's 6, it's always good to see children doing this. She managed to stop using her Ventolin puffer when she used the simple steps. And the simple steps you can get free from the website. There's a chapter called the Buteyko Method for Children, and one single chapter is all you need to teach children how to do that. And it's pretty straightforward, and they respond consistently well. Alice had mild to severe asthma with a frequent runny nose and a regular cough. Since doing Buteyko, the cough has gradually improved, and she can control her runny nose with breathing exercises. Now, if you've got a child like that, pay attention. Another child, James, from Gracemere down in central Queensland. He had recently had an asthma spasm, and he was getting coughing attacks, wheezing during the day with exercising, and getting nebulized 3 times per day, which is probably overdosing, but he no longer needs that, and has the occasional puff, which I think he'll be off, or is off now. Lachlan from Rockhampton, from his mother, who's age 9. Previously, Lachlan needed Ventolin every night, being definitely wheezing and also exercise-induced. By the 3rd night of Buteyko, no nebules were used, only 1 puff of Ventolin, and by night 5 we had a whole day free of Ventolin, and has since needed only occasional puff. He's also seen improvement with bedwetting, and everybody's pretty happy with the whole deal. Bedwetting and your breathing are tied together, and quite often that happens in courses. Sandra from Rocky, she was on the path a lot of people are experiencing, with more Ventolin, more steroids every year. She's now stopped using Ventolin, has more energy, feels more alert, and loves breathing without wheezing. Rosalind from Gladstone, she got to stop her Ventolin nebulizer, her puffer, and some theatre tablets. And if you ever had theatre tablets, they're horrible things, and they make you feel quite unwell. Improved sleep, increased energy, increased stamina, stabilised appetite. Previously, well, now she can control the shortness of breath. Carmel did extremely well, reduced her Ventolin nebulizer, her Atropine nebulizer, and her Atropine puffer completely, and was just using a Ventolin puffer, which is what we saw in the clinical trials, a 95% reduction in need for relief medication. But extremely well done, Carmel. Oops. And that's the last one. As I said before, if you could tell people about this. It's not rocket science, it's not expensive, there's nobody making massive piles of cash off this particular technique, because you can learn it from a book if you pay attention, particularly with children. But look, let's spread the word. It's been more than 10 years since this was discovered by the Western Medical Foundation. Let's put some pressure on them. So As I said before, tell them, send this link to your friends, like this video, and do whatever you can on your Twitter and Facebook to send some messages out. Thanks for listening. I'm James Hooper, and I look forward to talking to you again on this channel. Thank you.